Today we're with Bethany Baristow-Morris, and we're coming to you through the International Institute of Live and Events, and we've got another one of our podcasts with a recent graduate from a university in the UK who is going to give our audience an insight into their university career, their work experience, and their current work that she's done since graduating. And as we've said earlier on in our pre-talk, is that the ink has just dried on her degree certificate. And when you achieved your degree certificate, what did you achieve? What was your classification?
First class in events management.
First class in events management. So, Bethany, would you like to just give a short introduction about who you are?
Yeah, so I have a theatre background originally, and I kind of fell into events by accident, like a lot of people tend to say. And I actually injured myself. That's why I stopped doing theatre and moved into more the management side of theatre and events, and also moved jobs to Alton Towers. So I went into the visitor attraction industry, and all of that has combined to where I am today.
So you're saying that you used to be a thespian?
Yes, I still am.
Right. So did you sing? What type of performance? What's your strength?
So musical theatre is what I studied. I did singing, acting, and dancing, with my main thing being ballet. But then I hurt my Achilles tendon and my hamstring. So I would say singing is now my strongest. But it would have been dancing before. Yeah.
So you still perform?
I do still perform, and I work with a local theatre company as well. I do their marketing.
Excellent. And throughout the time that you've been at university, you've been working on the side, so to speak, in that area?
Yes.
Yes. And did you find that fulfilling in any way in terms of something extracurricular to studying?
Yeah, definitely. It was very busy at times trying to fit it all in. But I'm a very organised person, sectioning off my time. So I made it work somehow.
Excellent. So today's podcast, viewers, is really to sort of extract and for you to understand how Bethany has navigated herself through what is really a short career so far, but a potentially very long career in the area of entertainment. And I use that in abbreviated commas. So you can go as far as you want with your skill set that I know you have, and what you're going to gain as you go forward. So you say obviously that musical theatre is your passion and your love, but obviously due to an accident, you weren't able to continue that, and then you decided to join university. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you go to university?
So whilst I was studying theatre, I worked in restaurants just as a waitress. And then once I stopped doing theatre, I decided to move out of the food and beverage industry and try something new, which is how I ended up at Alton Towers, doing their sales and customer service role. So it was a guest-facing role, selling fast tracks and dealing with feedback on the day inside the park. And I applied for a team leader role after about 5 months of being there, and I got it. And that's the job that I still do now, although it's changed a lot since then.
So how long have you been at Alton Towers, if you don't mind asking?
Since February 2019.
Right. So you've been there through the ups and downs, the pandemic, and you said there's been major changes to your role. So what specific changes have you had to encounter, and how did you overcome them?
So there's been quite a lot of changes just within the department itself. So in the time that I've been there, we've changed, the department name has changed several times, and kind of the focus of the department as well. So we were originally under product excellence, and we kind of were a sales and customer service team. Then we moved to become a commercial team. So we were very much sales driven rather than customer focused. And we kind of had a dotted line to the product excellence team then. And then we've changed multiple times since then, but we've now ended up as guest excellence. So sales has left my job role completely, which I like. I'm not a numbers person. And now my role is completely based on guest experience. So the team has grown massively. We now have a call centre. We operate live chat, all the social media responses, on the day feedback, email responses, and VIP experiences as well.
Okay. So within the area of events, as you said, customer experience and that part of your job role is a major part within the events industry overall. So I'd like to draw your attention back to the course that you took and to elaborate, if you can, if you felt there was any connection between what you learnt and what you were doing in your role within Alton Towers, and even while the role has changed, and if you could give your honest opinion on that.
Yeah, so in first year, straight away, we had a module called Managing the Visitor Experience, which I really enjoyed. That was kind of at the start of me just having become a team leader. So I think now with the experience I had, if I took the module again, I'd probably do my assignment completely differently. But I did do really well in the module. I think I got a first class in it. And I wrote all about the visitor experience of when I went to watch Hamilton in London. So I kept it very theatre based. But now I've had a lot more experience on different events and things like that. So there's a lot more that I could draw on now if I was to take it again.
Okay, so we'll touch on those events later on, the events that you worked on. But before we go on to that, so you've finished your first year, you move into your second year, you're still working in industry, you're still doing theatre, yep, still working at Alton Towers. So is there a module in your second year that you felt there was another connection with the industry that you were in at that time?
Yeah, so my entire second year was during the pandemic. So the pandemic started halfway through my first year. So the whole of my second year was during pandemic times, and I really enjoyed that year, my digital marketing modules, because they really helped me with the marketing that I was doing for the theatre company, which obviously we couldn't meet at that point. There were no rehearsals, no performances that were taking place. But I still was trying to build the presence of the company and get brand awareness built up in the area. So I actually used the theatre company as a case study for 2 of my projects for modules that year. And I did build up a massive following on all the social media accounts, which I created from scratch, fresh ones for rebuilding the business. And it was really successful. And now that we've started meeting again and we're doing performances again, the cast has grown hugely. Yeah.
So you saw a definite cause and effect in regards to what you were taught, and you were able to apply it, and you saw the outcomes.
Yes.
And that's hard for a lot of young people who are probably at university now, because they may not have, like yourself, the industry to apply it while they're studying. So they only can potentially, if they're taking those modules and they're going to go into that direction, to apply it once they've graduated. So they may not see there is a connection as yet, because a lot of the case study they may work on may be not so much fictional, but they could be case study that they don't know the full outcomes of those case studies because they could be taken from a journal article or a book. But like you said, you were able to apply it to something real and see the specific outcomes from that in regards to what you were learned. And I think for anybody on a course, you would hope that to be the case, but that's not obviously the case for everybody. And you probably realized that people on your course didn't have that to rely on and couldn't translate the theory to practice, which a lot of academics talk about in regards to the learning process. So it's really fortunate for yourself that you did in that respect. So did you do a placement or did you go straight into your final year?
I went straight into my final year. I did look at placements, but it was quite limited what was available because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that were available were kind of online placements, and I wanted to work within an event environment rather than online. So I went straight on to my third year.
Okay. So while you were in your third year, the pandemic was still around or not?
Yes.
It was. Yes, it was. I mean, we were coming to, not to the close, but we're coming out of it slightly. Yes.
Yeah.
So in regards to the organization you worked with while you were studying, did they close down entirely or were they partially open in terms of visitors?
So we closed several times. So in total, I was furloughed 4 times and brought back and furloughed and brought back, depending on the business needs at the time. So sometimes I was brought back when a new government announcement came out and we started receiving an influx of inquiries. So me and some of my team were brought back in to field those inquiries. But then when it died down again, we'd get furloughed again. And then, for example, I was brought back in November 2020. Yeah. And that was to help run the new Christmas product that had come out. But then we did go into tier 3. So a lot of that was cancelled and swapped and changed around for different offerings. So I was furloughed again then until about April, when I think that was the last time I was furloughed. So
right.
Yeah.
So the organization is up and running at full strength now.
Yes.
And has been for a good number of months throughout this current summer, 2022, would you say?
Yeah.
Yep. And numbers have gone back to their original 2019 levels or not?
No, not yet. That's been something that I've found really interesting to kind of watch, because on a busy day we'd see probably over 20,000 guests on park before COVID. And when we first came back after the first lockdown, we reopened at about 5,000, gradually built it up. We did get a lot of feedback, even when we first opened at 5,000, saying that we were being irresponsible and the park was too full. But actually, when you look at the numbers, people were really surprised. And it's just kind of a result of being in lockdown and away from crowds for so long that people weren't used to it and had new perceptions on what was busy and to what we had before.
Right. So you feel like people were a bit hesitant to return to the park and gain the full customer experience.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're still not back now. So we've kind of seen around 15,000 on a busy day at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Well, considering that a lot of people couldn't go on holiday because aircrafts couldn't fly because of staff weren't available, you would have thought a lot of people would have done staycation and travel to sites and experience, parts of the UK that they probably haven't experienced as of yet. But obviously, that's not the case for your particular visitor attraction. So they may have a strategy to try to counteract that. I'm sure they will, to then bring that forward. So, like I said, you're coming into your final year, and you're looking at those modules and you're thinking to yourself, one, how do I get a first? I'm sure that's what you were focused on.
Yeah.
But not only that, how do I then ensure that what I learn is going to help me push my career on? So how was your final year for you? What's your thoughts on that?
So I read a book right before I went into my final year. I won't say what it's called. It's got a swear word in it. It's called F Being Humble. And it's really good for kind of self-promotion and a bit about imposter syndrome and that kind of thing. And I took a lot of that with me into third year. I made an online portfolio, which is just an Instagram account, which I just use for events, industry things. And I've kind of done it as a bit of a personal brand. So I used my marketing knowledge from the marketing modules that I'd already done, and kind
You
of
started blogging, did you as well?
not blogging as such, but kind of doing a little. It's like a diary of all of the events that I've worked on.
Through images or videos?
Images and videos. I've done like a few reels and that kind of thing as well.
Right.
But it's really useful to look back through when I'm applying for jobs or courses and things like that.
So when you went for jobs, did you inform the potential employer about your online presence?
Yes, it's at the top of my CV.
Right. So you could probably tell if they went on there and had a look when you looked at the analytics. Or did you check the analytics to see if there was a spike?
Yeah, I do. But then it's hard to tell because it is a public profile anyway, so it does get kind of views anyway.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So how long you been running that persona online?
It was just before I went into third year.
And you're still running it now, are you?
Yes, yeah.
Right. Okay.
It is often as I do something
That you upload.
Yeah.
And from reading that book, it gave you the impetus to do that. But have you found it more of a cathartic thing, or have you found that it has helped you in reflecting or helped you in gaining employment, or has people commented on it when you applied for a job?
It's been really useful for, like you say, reflecting on things that I've done, especially specifically what my duties were in a specific role that I've done, or what I learned from doing something. And then I find it really useful when I am applying for a job. When I'm editing my CV to match the job description, I go back through the profile and I can find specific skills that I've been able to apply in the past and pop that into my application.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. So there you are. Graduates or students who are still at university, an online blog that gives you a presence prior to you leaving. I know people use LinkedIn, like you say, and they may use other social media sites to give a presence, but you felt that this particular one has allowed you to, like you said, reflect and chart and document things that you've done for those who are doing things. And I suppose that's a good way of really looking back over what you've done, because sometimes a CV, it's two-dimensional when you send it to somebody, and suppose when people see your videos or your images, they probably can respond to those much better than they can to a sheet of paper that just tells them what you've done in respect of that. So that may be let's say a little nugget for your audience to take forward, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, like I said, it all depends on them. So, final year, what was your most applicable module on the work that you're currently doing and the work that you have done while you were studying. Pick out that module.
I think my favourite module in final year was the event module.
Oh.
Just, I think, purely because I had studied events for almost 3 years by this point and had not been able to do an event. Whether that was attending an event or putting on my own event. The only ones that I'd been able to attend were online virtual events. So it was really good to be able to finally put one on. We had to cancel our first year event because of the first lockdown. So yeah, that was my favourite. And we, as a group, we did really well. We got a first class and we raised almost £5,000 for the charity that we chose. So yeah.
What was your role within that team?
During the planning process, I was deputy event manager, and we switched roles when it came to the delivery of the event. So myself and the event manager switched, and she became my deputy for the event delivery. And I, for the whole duration of planning to delivery, I was also the health and safety officer as well.
So in the roles that you took within that particular event and the delivery of that event and the planning of the event, did you see any crossover with anything that you've done in industry up until that point?
Yeah, so it was, although it doesn't apply specifically to my job role at Alton Towers, I do work on like the incident team some days at Alton Towers, and I'm a duty contact, so I regularly communicate with other departments like PR, marketing, health and safety, security, medical, so all these other departments that come together to run the attraction daily. I was able to kind of pick out things that we'd learned on the course and apply them to the event, or I asked opinions from my colleagues at work as well. So yeah, it was really good to combine the two and produce a really good event.
Okay, so since leaving and not going into those little golden nuggets about what you worked on so far since graduating, did you see any crossover in terms of what you've done on the events you worked on and what you did in your last year on your course?
Yes, I think the thing that I've been able to kind of notice the most within my job role is definitely comes from the marketing side of things. A lot of my job involves working with PR and coming up with comms plans and things like that. So a lot of what I've learned, I think I can't remember if it was a report for you or not, about the use of social media in an event crisis, but I did write a report on that, which I found really interesting to write because I was able to use actual comms plans that I've written at work with the PR manager as a case study in my assignment, and I was able to incorporate the two.
Right. Okay. Well done. So now you've left university and you graduated. What year did you graduate?
This year, 2022.
Well, this is specifically for the audience. So you've only just graduated and you contacted me, and I'm not sure, I think you contacted me to say that you were about to get a job with which organization, which event was it?
The Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games.
And I said,
take it.
Yes, take it. So for those of you who are aware of, and I'm sure you should have been, because it was a major event that was delivered and just completed within the UK, and it doesn't come around that often. I think the last time it was in the UK was Glasgow, if I'm correct. But it obviously it goes to the Commonwealth countries, and since the death of Her Majesty the Queen, a lot of people now will probably understand what the Commonwealth is and all the countries that are represented in the Commonwealth, in terms of, and particularly why the Commonwealth Games now is such an important event. So probably they can really pull those together. But going back to the event itself, this is a major event in terms of its impact. It took place. Where did it take place?
Birmingham.
And you don't know Birmingham that well, I take it?
No, I was born in Birmingham, but I moved away when I was very young, so
okay,
it's nice to go back.
Right. So you went back to your birthplace.
Yes.
Right. So the likelihood of most people having the opportunity to work on a major event is, for a lot of people, it's quite rare because they come around so infrequently, unless they're prepared to travel internationally. So the fact you jumped on this and grabbed it by the shirt tails, as they say. So what was your role within this event, or roles, and how did it play out for you as a new graduate in her first year of leaving university, working on a major event such as the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham?
So I covered multiple roles in my time with the games, because I actually started as a volunteer. So when I was still in my third year, back in October, so literally just started my third year at uni, I attended my interview to be part of the Commonwealth Collective. And they said that we'd hear back kind of February, March time. So I thought nothing of it. And then I received an email saying that I hadn't been successful in getting a position, which I was kind of disappointed about, but there was so many thousands of roles and many more thousands than that people who wanted them. So I kind of just thought it's one of those things. It's still going to be an event that you can attend and in your country. So it's still, a great opportunity to go and learn from. Yep. But then a few months later, actually, it was the day that I handed in my dissertation. I received an email from Birmingham Ceremonies Limited saying that they wanted me to be a casting volunteer with them. And basically what had happened was the Commonwealth Collective had looked at my skills and experience on my application and my theatrical background, and they'd passed my details on to the smaller company that had been set up specifically to do the opening and closing ceremonies of the games. So I accepted that job offer, and again, like I say, it was a volunteer role. So I was only doing one shift a week because I was having to drive to and from Birmingham, and I did 2 shifts, and on the second shift I parked up in the car park of the secret rehearsal site, and I met the head of transport and fleet for the ceremonies. He was doing like some research on where people were driving from and why they were choosing to drive rather than use public transport, because there was a big thing around this games about it being the sustainable games, so everyone was supposed to be using public transport where possible, but that wasn't possible for me to get to that location. And when I explained why I was traveling from where I was traveling from, because he was astounded that I was doing it for a volunteer role, I explained that I was an events graduate, soon to be graduating, and he offered me a job there on the spot. And I had to do a bit of an interview, but it was more kind of a formality. And then I started about 3 days after that conversation in the car park. So that's how I got the job. So volunteering is definitely worth doing.
And before you go on, and I'd like to bring testament to that, because a lot of students are told to volunteer, and I always tell people to volunteer, and to use the opportunity to network with the people that you meet, because you don't know what opportunities will come from it. And I think you've probably been a clear example of why you need to do these types of volunteer roles, and while you're in there, that's when the opportunities come, and if they do come, how you capitalize on those opportunities. And it's clearly obvious through a conversation that's how you managed to secure another role within the same event itself. And people will look at what you said and probably feel that they've had similar situations like that, and they ask themselves, or they may ask themselves the question, why am I volunteering? Well, you're volunteering to a large degree to gain experience, but also open up yourself to the environment and the people and the networks and the friendships that you're going to make. And you don't know where it's going to lead to. So now you're in this new role, which you didn't expect.
Yeah.
And what skill set did you feel you needed, or did you go in there thinking to yourself, I've got no idea what I'm doing. This is transportation and logistics. This is so outside my comfort zone, or can I perform in this area? What were your main thoughts?
So the role was transport and fleet coordinator. And exactly what you've just said, I was really nervous because I didn't know, I had no experience doing anything like that. Yeah, I was nervous when I first went, but there was so much going on that I didn't really have time to worry about what I was doing, because I just had to do it.
So
So
what was first? Tell us your first day when they threw you in the deep end. Recount to us your first day. Hopefully you did it on one of your video blogs.
yeah, so my first day was kind of, they did ease me in. It was a nice day. I went to Alexander Stadium, where the offices were based, and I worked with the head of the department, who is the person that I'd met in the car park. And I just shadowed him all day. So he took me into meetings with him. So we went to go and meet the transport manager for the organising committee. Because it's kind of two separate entities, but obviously we needed to work together. And they were kind of discussing where spectators were going to park for the opening and closing, or where they were going to stage buses that were coming in. How many extra buses did we need Transport for West Midlands to put on, for the cast to be included in the numbers, and all that kind of thing as well, because there was a cast of thousands who were all volunteers and were entitled to free public transport as part of the cast. So there was all of this, which just in that one meeting were things that I wouldn't have considered myself.
So you left there and opened up an Excel spreadsheet, did you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Excel was my best friend for the whole time that I worked there. I did a couple of days at the stadium, and then I moved over to the secret rehearsal site, which was run daily like it was a visitor attraction itself. There was a control room, which I was kind of based in the same marquee as that, with the ops team. And then right in the next tent, which was really interesting for me when I did have downtime, was like the production team. And obviously having a theatre background, it was really interesting to watch them work when I did have the time to. Yeah.
Okay. So you said you were working for the opening and closing ceremony. So did you gravitate completely away from them, and working on transportation, or were you having a duality across those two?
So my role was still with the opening and closing ceremony business that had been set up, Birmingham Ceremonies. And I was mainly working at the rehearsal site up in the lead up to the opening. Then kind of 2 or 3 weeks before, I moved over to Alexander Stadium as the rehearsals started to move over there. But then it was really interesting for the closing. Obviously, I had an operational role during the ceremony as well. But during the closing, it was really interesting to see, because obviously we couldn't rehearse in the stadium because the athletics was happening in there. So a temporary stage was set up at the rehearsal site, and all dress rehearsals happened there. And then overnight before the closing, a team worked through the night to set up the staging ready for the big closing ceremony.
So one would probably presume that your background in theatre and production and staging and rehearsal and performance really came to play when you were working with the ceremony, open and closing ceremony, would I?
Yeah.
It definitely had a crossover.
It definitely did. And it was really interesting because there were certain, going into, especially starting 2 months out from the event, I found originally quite difficult because there are so many abbreviations and things that had code words and code names, and I had no idea what they were. And I was given pages and pages of like a dictionary of how to work at Birmingham ceremonies and understand the language, but being thrown into the job, you can't look up what someone's talking about whilst they're talking to you.
So the radio communication or the conversation sometimes was like another language, would you say?
Yeah, sometimes. But I was really lucky to, so one of the two assistant managers that I was working with, Vicky and Thane, they were really, really helpful in like helping me understand everything. I mostly worked with Vicky, and she really helped and explained lots about event logistics to me. They'd both just come from working on Expo, and so had the manager as well, JD.
And that's Expo in Dubai.
In Dubai, yeah.
Yeah.
And so from a logistics and operational jargon point of view, they really helped me. But then at the same time, they are very logistics operations professionals in terms of their experience and background. So sometimes there were things like, for example, vomitorium. They didn't know what that was, whereas me from a theatre background could explain that to them.
Explain that to your audience. What does that mean in logistics?
So vomitorium in a theatre is kind of when a theatre is in the round, it's kind of the entry onto, it's what would be the wings on a normal stage, like a proscenium arch stage. And obviously the ceremony was performed in a stadium, which was in the round. So we used the vomitoriums to get the cast onto the field of play.
And I think most people now probably go to big stadium events and performance. They see a lot of artists performing in the round. It's become quite popular. It's not something that obviously the Shakespeare Theatre was in the rounds. There's nothing new in that sense. But from a point of view of festivals and events and performers, they've taken to working in the round because it gives that all-round view for everybody, particularly if you're in a stadium and if you're in a field. Whereas you get a better view in terms of everybody having viewable access to the performers on the stage. So you were able to translate that to your job. Did you think you were effective in that role when you reflect back on it now?
Yeah, definitely. I did. It was kind of, I was lucky in that being in charge of the transport, I was only really busy when people were arriving and then leaving at the end of a rehearsal. So I was lucky to have a lot of downtime in between, where as long as I'd got kind of my office work done, I was free to roam the rehearsal site and watch the rehearsals and watch the choreographers working and the stage managers and all of that sort of thing.
Okay. So this was a real invaluable experience, I would imagine, a golden opportunity to get to be picked up for a job that you didn't apply for originally because you went for volunteering, and then be picked up for another job, which was just coincidental based on the conversation that you had. So did any of those departments or individuals give you feedback since now the game was completed and moving to a next location?
Yeah. So all of the team that I worked with were really supportive, and all kind of, what are you doing next? And it was really interesting to see where they're all going next as well.
Good point. Right. So what was their onward journey? What's their next event they were going to?
Most people are on to the World Cup. And then JD, the manager, after that is he's got a long contract with the Olympic Committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before they went off on their onward journey, they gave you feedback, and if they did, what was that feedback?
Yeah, so JD, my manager, was very much like you, said this is going to open a lot of things for you. You're clearly, it's great that Alton Towers are having you back, but you've got so much, like, doors opening for you and opportunities that are available, and kind of it was a tricky one because for him to kind of give specific feedback as to the role that I'd been doing, because he was very often based in the office whilst we were on the ground doing the actual operations. But the two managers that I worked with, especially Vicky, like I say, I was with her most of the time. They've both offered to write me references and give it any support that I need for any future roles. So yeah, right. they were all very impressed.
So people are probably asking themselves the question, why didn't you follow them on to these other major events that they were moving on to, considering that they had glowing reports about you and were willing to put their name to your reference?
Yeah.
What was your reason not to go on to those other major events?
Working abroad doesn't particularly appeal to me. So although I love kind of the working in the events environment, I loved working in Birmingham and being part of that kind of home event. But working abroad, yeah, doesn't appeal to me, and I'm much more interested in visitor attraction management rather than or just visitor experience, even if it was at an event.
Yeah.
That's what is my kind of passion: visitor experience and accessibility.
So you had the opportunity if you wanted to.
Yes.
And that's what is a little takeaway from that, which I want people to pick up on. But like you said, is that once you're in that environment and you perform well enough in that environment, people will pick up on it, and therefore they will offer it to you or give you the option, if you wish, to go on and do something else within there. So I'm sure if another major event, because England is littered with them now and have been historically and will continue in the future. And when they come back round again, I'm sure they'll probably pick up the phone and give you a call if you don't call them in regards to where you are in your work life. So you finished at the Commonwealth Games. It was a do you think it was a success in your opinion?
Yeah, it was really interesting reading the reviews of something that I'd been involved with, and also being able to watch it back on iPlayer was really surreal, knowing that I'd kind of helped get Ozzy Osbourne onto the field of play.
Some people may ask themselves how.
It was interesting.
Would you like to elaborate, or is that one of the industry secrets that sometimes us as event managers cannot tell?
It was quite an operation, and he had all of his family with him as well. So I met Sharon as well, and everyone, all the Osbournes, and they were they were driven onto the field of play from outside the red line. So most people had to walk through from that point, but
That's what celebrity status gives you, hey?
Well, all celebrities had to walk through as well, apart from the
Osbournes, yes.
So yeah, they were searched outside the red line and then driven directly onto the field of play and then driven straight back out again. The only other people that got that treatment were the royals. So yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, so, I can't even remember what the question was now.
No, that's fine. Because like I said, I'm trying to determine the success of the event, but I wanted you to talk about it from, and the next question I wanted to ask you now is about from the customer experience, because that's an area that obviously you've been working in for quite a number of years in different roles and different organizations. So from customer experience point of view, did you look at any of the feedback and the reviews to determine if you felt the event was a success from a customer point of view, or was there anything that you felt they could have done differently to enhance the visitor experience going forward?
Yeah, it was an interesting one, because when I first joined the company, I wasn't really aware of the difference between Birmingham ceremonies and the organising committee. But once I took on the role, I kind of understood that the organising committee were looking after everything to do with spectators, and spectators were nothing to do with us. I mean, obviously, if one approached me and asked for directions or something, obviously I helped, but in terms of the strategy and what was happening with them and the logistics of the spectators, that was all down to the organising committee. So the experience that we were impacting was that of the volunteer cast members mostly, and they I was obviously directly involved in their transport, but we became very much involved with the accessibility side of that as well. So those who have blue badges were given parking arrangements outside of the stadium, and then we kind of golf buggied them into the stadium. But yeah, it was interesting to see from kind of not a spectator point of view, which is obviously what I'm usually used to.
Yeah.
It was good to see it from an internal side.
I suppose it would also be good as well when the official, let's say, study is written on the Commonwealth Game, which it will be written and it will be published, to also reflect on that as well. And I'm not sure he's been given the responsibility to actually write it and publish it. I'm sure someone within the organisation is doing it, or a university may be co-opted into doing the research and publishing that. But it'd be good at a point later on is to look back at that report to see the data, the statistics, and the analysis of that to determine how successful it was from not just from the customer perspective, but also from the internal delivery, and also I suppose from the departments that you worked in that respect. Because obviously now, like I said, you're at the start of your career, literally at the start of your career since you was university, and it's all that information that you can use in the future, which I'm sure you will do. So we're coming on to where you are now. So now you finished with the Commonwealth Games, and you're still working within the role of visitor experience for a themed attraction. But you recently applied for a job. You may not want to give the name of the organization yet, because I know that you haven't formally agreed. But how do you think that what you've learnt across this stepping stones, university, working while you were at university, working at the Commonwealth Games, has helped or led you to this current role that you've just applied for?
Yeah, so the role, a bit of an outline of what the role is. It's at what should be classed as a visitor attraction, but isn't currently. And the role that I have applied for and been offered has been created to help implement the strategy of turning that into a visitor attraction, which includes a culture change within the current workforce and into understanding that it's a visitor attraction, not a retail brand. And so one of my modules was in one of my final modules was all about culture change in an organisation. So that's come in very useful, and I'll hold my hands up and say that was one module that I didn't think I would use, never mind so soon after graduating. And I've really enjoyed applying things to my role and growing my role as I've learned more, both from my job and degree into my current role, and it's really set me up for having the professional skills and maybe foresight to be able to go into this new role. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. I know we've got to be quite candid at this moment in time, because, like you said, you've been offered it, but you haven't formally accepted it yet. So the role itself will bring together a lot of things that you've learned at university, that you've learned while you've been working within the area of theatre performance, and also since you've moved into the, let's say, the major events and picked up some knowledge and skills there. But like I said, now you're going to move into an organization, if you formally accept it, to change an organization, like you said. And for anybody who's currently working in an organization or will go to work in an organization will know that organizational change, it can be very difficult for not just the organization itself overall, but the people who work in the organization individually, to get them to, like you said, a different way of thinking, and also believing in the strategy that you're going to put forward to bring some sort of positive change or a different way in terms of what they currently do. So that may be a real interesting development for you in terms of going forward, and possibly a really good challenge for you in terms of how you move forward. And I believe that to be the case, knowing what I know of your intellectual ability to then take information and apply that information within a real world setting. So I do wish you well if you formally accept that role, and I'll be looking forward to hear how that goes forward for you. And probably we can do another podcast in the future in regards to that. But before we do close for today, is there any little golden nugget that you would like to tell current students or recent graduates that would help them or give them any impetus or inspiration as they struggle through this period of change?
Volunteer. I would have volunteered much more than I have done if it hadn't have been for the pandemic. But I do feel that I definitely made up for it in the last kind of section of my degree. I've worked on charity events like the Race for Life, a local venue that does kind of music concerts and festivals, and I also, my marketing role with the local theatre company is a charity, so I do volunteer there as well. Everything I do for them is on a volunteer basis, so there's opportunities everywhere to volunteer. You just have to maybe create them yourself if they're not presenting themselves to you.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you very much for that, Bethany. And I'd like to say thank you for joining us on our podcast from the International Institute of Live Events. Look out for some more interesting discussions with young people like yourself. Hopefully it's a benefit for the audience. So I'll say goodbye to you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.